My trad wife faked her entire life for millions, so I live-streamed her beating me with a rolling pin to 50,000 fans. I was staring straight into the glowing glass lens of a $4,000 DSLR studio camera, hot blood trickling down the bridge of my nose and dripping onto my collar, while 50,000 people watched my wife frantically swinging a solid maple rolling pin at my skull. The live chat on the monitor beside the camera was scrolling so fast it was nothing but a blinding, continuous blur of white text and horrified emojis. For 5 agonizing, suffocating years, the internet had worshipped this woman as the ultimate paragon of domestic perfection. They bought her cookbooks, they sponsored her lifestyle, and they praised her submissive, gentle spirit. But right now, in the harsh, unfiltered glare of 3 massive LED ring lights, the world was finally witnessing the violent, unhinged monster I was legally bound to. If you have never lived inside a perfectly curated, monetized lie, let me try to explain the specific kind of psychological torture that was my daily existence. My wife, Elena, was a top-tier, tradwife influencer. She had over 3 million followers across her social media platforms, pulling in upwards of $20,000 a month in ad revenue, brand sponsorships, and affiliate marketing. Her entire digital empire was built on the foundation of biblical submission, feminine grace, and a fiercely anti-modern lifestyle. Her feed was a relentless, sun-drenched grid of freshly baked sourdough loaves, pastel vintage aprons, perfectly arranged wildflowers, and lengthy captions about how a woman's true purpose was to serve her husband and maintain a peaceful, pure sanctuary. The reality was a living nightmare. Elena was not a submissive, gentle homemaker. She was a deeply narcissistic, violently controlling, volatile tyrant who ran our house like a maximum security prison. When the cameras were rolling, she would look at me with these big, doe-like eyes, speaking in a soft, breathy whisper that drove her engagement metrics through the roof. The absolute second the red recording light blinked off, her face would harden into a cold, venomous snarl. She tracked my location 24 hours a day via a hidden GPS application on my phone. If I stopped for gas on my way home from my job as a warehouse manager and delayed my arrival by more than 6 minutes, my phone would light up with a barrage of text messages accusing me of ruining her filming schedule. She controlled everything. The finances, my wardrobe, my posture, and my facial expressions. I lived my life in a constant state of flinching, terrified of triggering her explosive temper. If I didn't look perfectly, blissfully happy in one of her staged family photo shoots, she would punish me. 3 months ago, I blinked during a brand-sponsored photo for an organic flower company. When the photographer left, she picked up a heavy, hand-painted ceramic mixing bowl, the exact bowl she claimed was a cherished family heirloom in a viral video, and hurled it directly at my chest with the velocity of a major league fastball. It shattered against my collarbone, leaving a massive, dark purple bruise that I had to hide under long-sleeved flannel shirts for weeks. She told me if I ever ruined a brand deal again, she would falsely report me to the police for domestic violence, knowing her massive audience would immediately believe the fragile, soft-spoken housewife over the quiet, imposing warehouse worker. I was entirely trapped. I had been systematically isolated from my friends, emotionally ground into dust, and reduced to nothing more than an unpaid, silent prop in her lucrative theatrical production. This past Sunday started like any other weekend in our personal hell. I was supposed to be at the warehouse pulling a double shift to oversee an inventory audit. Elena had informed me she was hosting a massive, highly anticipated, Sunday family roast, live stream at 5 o'clock that evening, sponsored by a premium organic meat delivery service. She had explicitly ordered me to stay out of the house until exactly 4:45, at which point I was to enter through the back door, put on a specific hand-knit sweater, and sit at the dining table looking famished and grateful. However, around 1 in the afternoon, a massive plumbing main ruptured at the warehouse, flooding the loading docks with 3 inches of black sludge. The facility manager immediately shut down the building and sent everyone home. I drove back to our house in the pouring rain, my stomach tying itself into a tight, anxious knot. Coming home early was a severe violation of her strict protocols. I parked my truck 3 blocks away so the engine noise wouldn't get picked up by her external microphones, and I carefully approached the house, meticulously avoiding the motion sensors of the Ring cameras she had installed on every corner of the property. I unlocked the back door to the mudroom as quietly as humanly possible, wincing as the hinges let out a faint squeak. I stepped inside inside and immediately froze, my senses aggressively assaulted by the environment. The house was dead silent, but the air was thick, heavy, and intensely aromatic. It didn't smell like raw ingredients, flour, or simmering broth. It smelled absolutely incredible. It smelled like rich truffle oil, deeply aged Parmesan cheese, roasted garlic, and expensive red wine reduction. It smelled exactly like a 5-star, incredibly expensive Italian bistro. I slipped off my wet boots and crept toward the kitchen archway. The kitchen was utterly spotless. The pristine white marble countertops gleamed under the recessed lighting. The heavy copper pots hung perfectly undisturbed on their rack. The sink was bone dry. There was absolutely zero evidence that anyone had been cooking, prepping, or chopping anything in this room for days. Yet, sitting directly in the center of the kitchen island was a massive, beautiful, rustic ceramic serving dish containing a perfectly structured, steam-billowing lasagna, flanked by a bowl of glistening, garlic-rubbed asparagus. I backed away from the kitchen, thoroughly confused, and bumped my hip against the woven wicker recycling basket in the mudroom. Elena had replaced all our standard plastic garbage bins with these expensive, custom-woven baskets to maintain her strict farmhouse aesthetic. The impact caused the basket to tip slightly, and the heavy, custom-fitted lid slid off onto the floor. I knelt down to pick it up, and my eyes caught a glimpse of something strange inside the basket. It wasn't empty, but it didn't look like recycling either. There was a piece of rigid, brown shipping cardboard wedged horizontally about halfway down the basket, acting as a false bottom. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I reached my fingers down into the wicker basket, wedged my nails under the edge of the cardboard, and pulled it up. The smell hit me like a physical blow. Stale garlic, cold grease, and the distinct, metallic tang of heavy foil. The entire bottom half of the massive recycling bin was a hidden, crammed graveyard of high-end takeout containers. There were dozens of grease-stained brown paper bags bearing the logos of the most expensive restaurants in our city. The Cheesecake Factory, Le Bistro, Antonio's Fine Italian. I pulled out a crumpled, buttery receipt from the very top of the pile. It was time-stamped from 2 hours ago. It was a delivery order from Antonio's for one large artisan truffle lasagna and a side of roasted asparagus. Total cost, $85. I dug deeper, pulling out a receipt from Thursday. A massive order from a local homestyle bakery for 3 rustic sourdough loaves and a dozen blueberry muffins. The absolute, mind-shattering truth washed over me, chilling my blood. Elena didn't cook. She had never cooked. Her entire empire, her cookbooks, her tutorials, her endless videos about the divine feminine art of providing nourishment from scratch, it was all an elaborate, expensive, perfectly executed fraud. She was spending hundreds of dollars a day on high-end restaurant takeout and artisan bakery goods, meticulously transferring the food onto her expensive vintage stoneware, hiding the packaging in a false bottom bin, and sprinkling a little bit of raw flour on her nose to film the big reveal for her millions of adoring fans. And the sickest, most twisted part of it all, while she was feeding her followers this fantasy of domestic bliss, she was starving her actual husband. Every night, after the cameras turned off and the photos were taken, Elena refused to let me eat the expensive food she had purchased because I might ruin the aesthetic plating before she could take B-roll footage the next day. She forced me to take my meals down into the unfinished, freezing concrete basement. For the last 2 years, I had been eating cold, rubbery hot dogs and microwaved frozen peas off a flimsy paper plate, sitting on a rusted folding chair next to the water heater, while my wife threw away hundreds of dollars of perfectly good, untouched gourmet food upstairs. I felt the heat rising in my neck, a slow, crawling burn that settled right behind my eyes. My hands were shaking so violently that the crumpled receipt tore between my fingers. I shoved the cardboard false bottom back down into the basket and quietly stepped out of the mudroom, following the sound of a voice drifting down the hallway. Elena was in her meticulously decorated home office, sitting behind her massive oak desk. The door was cracked open just an inch. I peered through the narrow gap. She was sitting in front of a high-end, studio-quality Yeti microphone, wearing a pair of expensive acoustic headphones. She was currently in the middle of recording a voiceover track for her upcoming Instagram reel. Modern, career-obsessed mothers are actively failing their families, Elena crooned into the microphone, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet, incredibly judgmental honey. They are fundamentally lazy. They refuse to embrace the divine, sacred calling of the kitchen, choosing instead to poison their innocent children with processed, chemical-filled garbage because they are too selfish to wake up early and provide. She paused the recording, ripped the headphones off her ears, and let out a harsh, guttural sigh of pure annoyance. She stood up, grabbed a plastic tub of pre-made, store-bought, heavily preserved brown gravy from her desk, and aggressively peeled back the plastic slapstick film. She marched out of the office, completely failing to notice me standing in the shadows of the hallway, and walked into the kitchen. I watched in absolute disgust as she dumped the gelatinous, chemical-filled sludge into a vintage copper saucepan, turned on the induction burner, and set the microwave timer for a deli-bought rotisserie chicken she had hidden in the back of the pantry. She was literally microwaving processed garbage while recording audio shaming women for not cooking from scratch. That's when the real bombshell dropped. Elena left the kitchen to go upstairs to the master bathroom. I heard the heavy oak door click shut, followed by the distant, rushing sound of the shower turning on. I exhaled a shaky breath and stepped out into the light of the kitchen. Her silver MacBook Pro was sitting open on the massive butcher block island, the screen glowing brightly. I walked over to it, intending to simply close the lid so she wouldn't know anyone had been near her workstation. But as my hand hovered over the trackpad, my eyes locked onto the screen. She wasn't running video editing software. She had an encrypted, hidden cloud drive open on her desktop. The main folder on the screen was titled in bold, capitalized letters, Project Exodus, Rebrand Strategy. My stomach completely dropped out from under me. I tapped the trackpad, pulling up the contents of the folder. It wasn't just a collection of photos. It was a massive, meticulously detailed, legally terrifying strategy document. She had been working with an incredibly expensive, cutthroat public relations firm and a high-profile divorce attorney. I clicked on a subfolder labeled Evidence. It was a gallery of absolute fabrications. There were dozens of photos of bruises she had intentionally given herself by slamming her own thigh into the corner of the coffee table, or dropping a kettlebell on her foot, all labeled with dates and horrific, fabricated descriptions of me attacking her. There were screenshots of my text messages, brutally cropped and taken entirely out of context. A text where I had desperately written, "Please stop yelling at me, I'm begging you, I'm terrified to come home," had been cropped to just say "I'm terrified to come home," with a note attached claiming I was an unstable, paranoid abuser. I opened the main Word document. It was a drafted, multi-page PR rollout strategy for her upcoming, Survivor era. The document detailed exactly how she was going to file for emergency divorce, secure a temporary restraining order to legally evict me from the home I paid the mortgage on, and launch a massive, highly monetized, domestic abuse survivor campaign. The strategy projected that the sympathy engagement would double her monthly income. The document explicitly noted her lawyers planned to press felony assault charges against me using the fake photos, ensuring I would be sent to a state penitentiary while she kept the house, the cars, the 3 million followers, and the entire $20,000 a month empire. She wasn't just faking a lifestyle. She was actively, maliciously constructing a legal guillotine, and she was preparing to drop the blade on my neck to boost her engagement metrics. A cold, absolute terror gripped my chest, quickly replaced by a furious, primal instinct to survive. What in the absolute hell do you think you are doing, you pathetic, snooping little worm? I jumped, spinning around so fast my boots skidded on the hardwood floor. The shower had stopped running. Elena was standing in the kitchen archway. She was fully dressed in her costume, a pristine, authentic 1950s A-line floral dress, her hair pinned into perfect, bouncing curls, her lips painted a vibrant, vintage red. But her eyes were completely black with psychotic, unhinged fury. She saw the laptop screen. She knew exactly what I was looking at. The mask completely dissolved, leaving nothing but the monster underneath. "You weren't supposed to see that until the police came to drag you out in handcuffs," she hissed, her voice dropping into a guttural, terrifying register as she slowly advanced into the kitchen. "Do you have any idea how much money that rollout is going to make me? Brands love a victim, Thomas. They love a brave, beautiful woman who escaped a violent, blue-collar brute. You are going to make me a millionaire. You are completely insane," I whispered, my voice shaking as I backed away from the kitchen island, putting the massive butcher block between us. "You're a fraud, Elena. The food, the personality, the bruises, it's all a lie. I'm leaving. I'm taking the hard drive and I'm walking out that door." "You aren't taking anything," she screamed, a sharp, piercing shriek that echoed off the high ceilings. She lunged forward, grabbing the nearest object off the counter. It was a massive, solid maple rolling pin, a beautiful, heavy prop that she had literally never once used to roll dough. She vaulted around the edge of the island with terrifying speed, raising the heavy wooden cylinder high above her head. "You are nothing without my brand. You are a prop, a background extra in my life. I will ruin you, Thomas. I will put you in a cage and my followers will pay for the lawyer who puts you there. She swung the rolling pin with devastating force. I threw my arm up to block it, but the heavy wood deflected off my forearm and cracked sickeningly against the bridge of my nose. A bright, blinding flash of white light exploded behind my eyes, and a warm rush of thick blood immediately poured down my face, splattering onto the collar of my shirt. The force of the blow sent me stumbling backward into the open concept dining room. I crashed hard against her incredibly expensive, professional streaming station. The heavy metal tripod wobbled, and my hand slammed down hard onto the desk to catch my balance. My palm slammed directly onto her Elgato Stream Deck. Specifically, it slammed directly onto the glowing, pre-programmed macro button labeled Go Live, all platforms. The massive, $4,000 DSLR camera clicked loudly. The red tally light mounted on the top of the lens instantly illuminated, glowing like a beacon in the dimly lit room. The three massive LED ring lights flared to 100% brightness, bathing the entire dining room in harsh, unforgiving, surgical white light. On the monitor beside the camera, the stream dashboard instantly connected. Because she had pre-scheduled this highly anticipated, Sunday family roast, stream for her millions of followers, over 50,000 people had already been sitting in the digital waiting room. They were all instantly pulled into the live feed. Elena didn't notice the lights. She was completely blinded by her own psychotic rage. She stood in the center of the kitchen, her vintage 1950s dress perfectly pressed, her red lipstick immaculate, violently gripping a maple rolling pin in her hands like a baseball bat. She glared at me, panting heavily, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered malice. "Look at you," she sneered, pointing the wooden weapon at my bleeding face. "You pathetic, weak little man. You actually thought you could stand up to me? I own you, Thomas. Every single penny in that bank account belongs to me. I feed you the garbage you deserve. I let you live in my basement like a rat, and when I am finally done using you to build my brand, I am going to throw you away and watch you rot in a cell. Now get on your knees and clean your filthy blood off my floor before my stream starts." I stood there, wiping the hot blood out of my eyes with the back of my hand. I didn't scream back. I didn't cower. I just stood up completely straight, looked at the monitor, and watched the viewer count tick past 60,000. The chat box was moving so incredibly fast it was literally crashing the browser window. "I'm not cleaning anything, Elena," I said, my voice shockingly calm, completely devoid of the fear that had ruled my life for 5 years. I pointed a single, trembling, blood-stained finger directly over her shoulder. "Because your stream already started." Elena froze. The absolute silence in the room was deafening. Slowly, rigidly, like a rusted animatronic, she turned her head and looked at the streaming station. She saw the glowing red tally light on the camera lens. She saw her own face, twisted in rage, holding a weapon, projected on the massive preview monitor. She saw the viewer count. 65,000 live viewers. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a freshly painted corpse. The heavy maple rolling pin slipped from her suddenly entirely numb fingers, clattering loudly against the hardwood floor. "No," she whispered, her voice a fragile, terrified squeak. "No, no, no, cut the feed. Cut the feed right now." She lunged toward the computer desk, but I stepped in front of her, blocking her path with my sheer size. I wasn't finished. The internet needed to see the entire truth. I reached out and grabbed the camera by its heavy handle, ripping it off the tripod mount. I spun around, walking backward into the kitchen, keeping the lens pointed directly at her panicked, horrified face. "Welcome to the Sunday roast, everyone," I said loudly over her frantic screaming. "Let me show you how the perfect tradwife prepares her famous artisan meals." I kicked the woven wicker basket over with my boot. The false bottom spilled out, vomiting an absolute mountain of greasy, crumpled, high-end takeout boxes directly onto the pristine kitchen floor in high-definition video. I zoomed the lens in on the receipts. The Cheesecake Factory bags. The $85 lasagna receipt from Antonio's. The plastic tub of chemical gravy sitting next to the vintage copper pot. "Turn it off. Thomas, I swear to God, I will kill you. Turn it off," she shrieked, actively trying to claw at the camera lens, but I easily held her back with one arm. "And for dessert," I continued, ignoring her entirely, marching over to the kitchen island. I grabbed her open MacBook Pro, turned the screen entirely around, and shoved the camera lens inches away from the glowing display. I scrolled rapidly through the Project Exodus folder. I showed the live feed the legally drafted PR strategy. I showed them the fake, self-inflicted bruise photos. I showed them the exact, word-for-word legal plan to frame me for domestic abuse to gain sympathy followers. "This is Elena," I said, my voice finally cracking with the immense, overwhelming weight of 5 years of suppressed trauma. "She doesn't cook. She doesn't submit. She beats me. She starves me. And she was going to send me to prison for content." Elena fell to her knees in the middle of the kitchen, sobbing hysterically, burying her face in her hands. The performance was entirely over. Her entire multi-million-dollar empire was burning to the ground in spectacular, high-definition real-time, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to extinguish the flames. I didn't turn off the camera. I set it down on the kitchen island, perfectly framing her weeping form amidst the scattered takeout boxes and the open laptop showing her fraudulent legal strategy. I calmly picked up her personal smartphone from the counter. Because I knew her passcode, she made me memorize it so I could delete negative comments while she slept. I logged directly into her main social media management account. With quick, clinical precision, I completely locked her out. I changed the master password. I changed the two-factor authentication phone number to my own. I changed the secure recovery email address to an encrypted account I had created weeks ago. Before I locked the phone and tossed it into the sink, I typed out a single, final comment using her administrator account, and pinned it to the absolute top of the live stream chat for 70,000 people to see. "The king is finally leaving the castle. This isn't a kitchen, it's a crime scene." I didn't pack a bag. I didn't grab a coat. I walked out the front door, got into my truck, and drove away into the pouring rain, feeling lighter than I had in half a decade. By the time the local police arrived at the house, dispatched by literally hundreds of horrified viewers who had witnessed the physical assault on a live broadcast, Elena's digital existence had been thoroughly, surgically eradicated. She lost 1.5 million followers in the first 48 hours. Every single brand deal, from the organic flour company to the premium meat delivery service, issued public statements terminating their contracts and condemning her actions within the hour. The PR firm she had hired dropped her as a client immediately, terrified of the catastrophic legal liability. Because we were legally married and had no prenuptial agreement regarding the social media income, the massive bank accounts were considered communal property. I legally drained exactly 50% of the funds the following morning, leaving her with half the cash but absolutely zero future earning potential. I hired a shark of a divorce attorney, handed over the entire hard drive of evidence, and vanished. I moved 3 states away, retreating into the quiet, heavily forested mountains. I used my half of the digital empire's money to open a small, honest, entirely offline woodworking shop. I don't have social media. I don't own a camera. And for the first time in 5 incredibly long, agonizing years, I cook my own meals. I sit down at a heavy oak table that I built with my own 2 hands, and I eat my dinner warm, unstaged, and in absolute, beautiful peace. Am I the monster here for completely annihilating her multi-million-dollar empire on live television, or did she get exactly what she deserved for trying to turn my absolute destruction into a monetized rebrand?
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.